Very warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists as well. Deba, Beerud, Ratnesh, good to see you again. Actually, it's a great place where we left off in the previous session with Mithun saying that the differentiator is going to be customer ownership and customer servicing, and the heart of it all is customer experience. Let me maybe just start with a quick sort of context as to why we are having this discussion, and then we'll turn over to the panelists. As we all know, customer expectations are changing. Where, when, what, and how I want my needs is changing with the smartphone and internet being ubiquitous. We all want simple, intuitive, seamless digital experiences. And we've come to expect this in BFSI as well, especially in retail, where we are seeing a lot of what we call contextual parity play out, where as a customer, I'm not just comparing your products and services as a financial services provider with that of a rival bank or insurer, but rather I'm also comparing you with a consumer tech company, with an e-commerce company, with the neighborhood coffee shop where my offers are so personalized and customized, right? And from the supply side as well, this is changing with the fintech disruption, redefining what we understand as customer experience across the areas that Nitin mentioned in the last session on credit, on payments, insurance, and investments. And now, from the interventions from the regulatory and government side, there is massive investments to digitize and democratize financial services with, we saw with the account aggregator framework, with the open credit enablement framework, and so on and so forth. So this trifecta of drivers has also been given a further impetus by COVID, and the implication for all of us, incumbents and insurgents, is therefore an accelerated investment in digitization of customer journeys, advanced analytics, AI ML for customer acquisition, engagement, retention, and of course, building a modular tech stack that is flexible and adaptable for the next wave of technology that is coming. And we're seeing this in Bain as well in terms of the type of work we do now. It's heavily skewed towards customer experience transformation, digital transformation, new business models, operating model redesign, and so on and so forth. So in this context, let me start by asking each of our panelists to give their opening thoughts on how you think customer expectations and behavior has changed in BFSI, especially in the last 18 months, across payments, banking, wealth management, insurance, investments, and more importantly, how has the strategic priorities for your respective client organizations changed to adapt to this change, whether it's on digital, on data, on enterprise technology, so on and so forth. Let me start with you, Deba, from a Fidelity investments perspective, and having seen this space in a global scale. How have you seen your clients adapt to this change, and how are they redefining customer experience for their customer base?
Yeah, no, thank you, Rakesh, for the question. Again, thank you for inviting me to this panel. I would say from a Fidelity investment perspective, we are a global wealth management firm. We serve multiple different businesses. But in general, I would say the digital transformation we see within our company is starting to focus more and more on really transforming the customer journeys. I think we all hear about digital transformation from a capability perspective, from platform perspective, from different product perspective, data AI perspective. But end of the day, to the end customer, what they care about is what matters to them and how they interact with the product and services. So how all of this actually connects, and how we really think about the end-to-end customer journeys, how we make sure that the transformation is focused on really changing and redefining those. That's how I've been operating and thinking. So it's truly about really looking at the core customer journeys from a particular industry or context perspective. How do we rethink and reimagine them by looking at different platforms, different technologies, different things, and really connecting everything? I would say that has been one of the major focus within our company, but more so in the industry, that collectively this is no longer just about products or capabilities or platforms or new data or AI things. It's more about how do we really piece all those things together to really transform the customer experience and the journeys.
Thanks, Deba. Maybe let me turn over to you, Ratnesh, for your opening comments, and then Beirut, and then we'll get to the specifics.
Yeah, thanks, Rakesh. Again, thanks for inviting. I think 18 months the whole disruption, and I think we know the scale of the disruptions. I think two things have happened. One was already going, which was the consumer behavior, right? It altered, right? It we had the whole this set of new millennials, who were very very tech savvy, willing to take a risk, willing to go and research a lot, and then just go, and there's nothing called a loyalty now, or to stick with old partners or old institutions and all that. Whatever gives them that right moment of service, a great wow experience, they're willing to consume their product and services. So they're willing to take risk. So we had this whole 18 months of propelling that behavior. I think the behavior has again gone on. People are going online because the very fact there was a disruption, there were lockdowns, there were no physical visits, they're not visiting partners, there's no channel interventions. But on the other side, what we saw in the organizations, there was this whole initial acceptance of the fact that this digital way to stay, right? We saw massive disruptions in services. We saw massive disruptions where customers would not be able to reach, and there were only one channel or two channels of communications. We in India, country of paradox, we have urban cities where we probably have 80 or 85% of consumers going online, but then we also have a 80% tier two, tier three cities and parts where there was no or reluctance to go towards digital. That all changed dramatically. So organizations started accepting that omni-channel is the way to go. They already had started looking at the consumer behavior because it was inevitable. It has been there for last few years. The new millennials behavior and their ability to adopt to new products and services was always there. But I believe with COVID, organizations realized that digital, omni-channel consumer behavior, and then they realized with the fintechs coming in, the way they have to compete with them is basically only around customer experience. And they had a wealth of customer data with them, right? That was their asset. How do you basically get these consumers to provide that omni-channel wow customer experience? Focus on those core sectors, identify those core customers, which gives them the highest profitability. I think that's been the way we are seeing most of the consumers and organizations on both sides react to this pandemic.
Beirut, your thoughts on this?
So to add to what the others have spoken, I have a very specific point of view, which is the way digital and customer experiences are going. I think it's all, we are seeing a dramatic rise of conversational experiences, right? And let me explain what I mean, right? With the rise of smartphones and messaging apps, right? Websites and mobile apps are sort of declining in the sense that, websites were designed for the big screen, laptops, desktops, not so much for the small screen. And then mobile apps are perfect for the small screen, except that there are millions of apps, but most of us download no more than a few dozen on our device, right? So there's a huge sort of download barrier that people have in their minds, right? Meanwhile, messaging apps is where the people are, right? The users use it, all of us use it 50, 100 times a day, whether it's WhatsApp, maybe even SMS and so on, right? So consumers are starting to, they expect to be able to chat with businesses just as easily as chatting with friends and family, right? And therefore, I think businesses now have to go where the customers are. They have to interact with consumers through these conversational experiences, right? Whether it's chatbot or whether it's a customer support desk, either way, they need to have these conversations through messaging apps. Really, what's happening is these conversational experiences are the new digital storefront. This is where consumers are looking for businesses. This is where they're looking to transact, right? Because think about it, what's the alternative? Making a phone call to a call center, there's long waits for that. Going to the branch is inefficient and painful. Again, websites we talked about earlier, mobile apps. Again, how many fintech apps are you going to download? How many lending, banking, transactional apps is a consumer expected to download, right? But meanwhile, the conversation experience is sort of ideal in the sense that there's no download like an app. It's the right form factor, unlike a website. There's no wait compared to a call center. You can do it from anywhere, unlike going to the branch, right? So it's quick, easy, intuitive, it's natural, right? This is, humans know how to converse since we were kids, babies, really, right? So it's sort of the most natural and intuitive way to interact. And I think these sort of we expect that virtually every touch point across the entire customer life cycle is going to get transformed by these conversational experiences. And we're seeing a dramatic rise in conversational experiences.
Thanks, Beirut, and thanks all. Picking up on a few themes that you mentioned, one on digitization of journeys, both sort of self-serve but also assisted digital journeys will be the path forward. But then the way to deliver it may be more conversational as opposed to the conventional channels that we've been used to. And then the other point, Ratnesh, that you made on the concept of loyalty and customer advocacy, not so much dying but changing. Right, you're redefining the meaning of customer loyalty here, and in all these three themes, one very important sort of structural driver is data. First party data, third party data. How do you marry it and create the right insights specifically for customer use cases? And maybe let me pick up on that theme, and I'll turn it over to you, Ratnesh, to comment on how do you see companies manage these large structured and unstructured data sets going forward, and how important is data engineering and data science going to be going forward, and what's the role that a scalable infrastructure plays in being able to manage this?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I believe everyone whom I speak to is in some way or the other have realized that stitching the data and creating insights is very important. Some organizations are probably at the start, and some organizations are probably leapfrogged and doing that. Some organizations are trying to build something in house, and there are a lot of organizations who are looking at the model. But if I break that again down into two sets, one is what's the quantum of data we are talking about today, right? The quantum of data is very critical because today we just heard about this whole consumer experience and the whole unpredictable journeys, right? We all are, we just go and buy wherever, whichever platform. What we are doing here is we are probably exposing a lot of behavioral attributes of the customers, which a normal organizational uh, data platform does not contain, right? What we have typically, we have CRM data, we have interaction data, we have transaction data, right? We have a history of our purchases. And then the systems within like banking on terms of risk and compliance, and look at what can be the lifetime values and all that. But this whole set of external data of you and me, which is being thrown as crumbs are out there. So what we are also seeing, especially, and it's now very critical because on the top of the funnel, acquisition is becoming very important, right? There's so many people who are trying to grab your attention and take that particular piece of your wallet. So we're seeing a lot of investments where data on MarTech side is basically getting married in towards your traditional third party or your first party data, which is within the system. And we're seeing the concepts of CDPs coming in, CDPs which are not they're live, they're changing, they're real time, they are basically capturing behavioral profiles of your customers, obviously with all the privacy rules intact, and compliances and acceptance of the customer, but that is being married back into your whatever is the data rate. And not to mention, like in insurance, you have all this medical data, right? You have wearable devices, you have this whole IoT sensors data. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is too much data. This quantums of data is too much, and you need an intelligence layer. And this is where AI is no longer a buzzword, right? AI needs to basically start looking at these data and trying to convert them into insights. Because the next most important thing out here is that you need to marry and take this data and convert them into insights and action and put them into your actionable applications, which are customer facing, right? So if the customer is whether researching, customer is on your website trying to figure this out, what best products would you recommend, or customer is with you or maybe likely to churn, intervene at the right moment of time is so very critical because next moment you may lose that customer or you may lose that prospect. So getting this whole artificial intelligence to create insights out of this whole set of data and plug them back into what we call as the interaction systems or the action systems in almost real time is something becoming very, very critical. And that's where the entire artificial intelligence is working on creating these meaningful insights out of these whole set of data lakes and plugging back into value to the customer, wow customer experience, uh, understanding or immediately recognizing a bad customer experience, and then reacting to it.
Let me pick up on that theme of, you mentioned it's not just about data engineering and data science, but also knowing what the right applications or use cases are that would then deliver superior customer
Yes.
experience and maximize customer lifetime value. So on that point, one of the biggest use cases that's coming up, especially in the conversational world, is hyper personalization. And Beirut, maybe you can comment on how you see this evolve across the channels that you are operating on, especially the self-serve channels. How does hyper personalization evolve in the world of BFSI, and the potential role that AI, ML, but also NLP can play in this world going forward?
Yeah, I think, see, one cool thing about conversational channels in particular, unlike the web or app, is it's a deeply personalized experience because every interaction is one-on-one, private. It's a private chat, right? And therefore, the right analogy to think of when building a conversational experience is, it's like banks and financial service businesses. They have these relationship managers, right? And but usually they're expensive, and therefore they do it just for premium customers. Well, imagine if using technology you can enable a personal relationship manager for every consumer, right? And imagine that the consumer can chat with this relationship manager, and this RM is it knows the customer very well, which means it knows their transaction history, knows their preferences, knows what they have bought before and what they've done, and so on. Number two, it knows everything about the bank or the financial service company, all the products, all the services it can offer, and so on. Right. Three, it can leverage AI and natural language processing capabilities to understand queries phrased in natural language. It also has ability to handle dialogue, right? So that over multiple steps, it can maintain context so that the user does not have to repeat itself. So if you combine all of these things together, you can create some amazing personalized experiences so that when the person starts chatting, unlike a call center where you have to authenticate yourself and you start chatting with one department, then you're transferred to a second or a third department and so on. Here, it can instantly authenticate you. It knows all the context. It knows very likely what transaction you're calling about because it just happened a minute ago or maybe a day ago. It knows what to how to resolve it, how to upsell, how to cross sell, and so on, right? And in some ways it can provide an extremely delightful sort of experience. It's like literally, if you could take from the bank, imagine the perfect, the best sort of RM, the relationship manager, and make it available to every customer. It's just a delightful experience, right? And instead of just premium consumers being able to use it, I think now it becomes available to everyone. But to make all of this magic work is it needs a lot of data, data science, AI and ML for conversations, and a lot of personalization, so that this virtual RM can fine tune the responses and the interactions to the right customer at the right time in the right context.
Thanks, Beirut. And then picking up on that topic, in a market like India, it's unlikely that you will have everything move to self-serve, especially for a large segment of consumers. So the relationship manager still, or the person, whoever that person is,
human RM,
the human person, well, the human channel is still important going forward. But then the role of that human channel is going to change, right? So it's one of the hypotheses we have is the human channel will become an assisted digital channel, and it's going to be one of the key anchors on which there will be mass migration to the self-serve channels. and in many cases continue as assisted digital channels to do digital journeys on behalf of the consumers. From your perspective, Deba, would you agree with that statement for a market like India? And how would you see in organizations? Can you give me some examples of journeys that potentially in your sector you've seen companies change to adapt to this environment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I generally agree. Obviously, my expertise, I think where we serve is more in the Western part of the world, but I still think a lot of the learnings will still apply. I'll give some examples. So let's say during the pandemic here, right, in the US, certainly when the market started crashing, the trading volume from a wealth management investment perspective certainly kind of picked up. People were just calling to see, hey, what do I do with my money? And the call centers were just kind of backlogged. We're just kind of waiting, right? And people normally were not very comfortable in making trading decisions, transactions through virtual agents or chatbots or those kind of things. But then the kind of the market pressure and the pandemic actually forced them to, like, you know what? I don't need to wait in the call center, or I don't need to go to a branch. I'm very comfortable actually doing everything online. I'm comfortable talking to a virtual agent. People are doing actually very comfortable doing virtual financial planning. Like, for example, people are used to go to a branch and sit down with a financial planner and really go through the planning process, versus now they're very comfortable sitting in a Zoom meeting or something and just kind of directly accessing or talking to a financial professional. So I think the adoption dramatically changed, as well as the supply side. All the companies, they dramatically changed how they offer their capabilities. I think everybody invested very, very extensively in really driving their digital capabilities. I think all of these things happened in a more, I would say, assisted way versus purely self-service. I think a lot of the things that are very transactional that went self-service, a lot of things that are more kind of interaction and guidance oriented, they became more and more assisted, right? And then also in financial services, a big focus we have is on risk management. So I think sometimes, even with AI and ML and all, like, the technology is not always matured enough in the appropriate context to be fully driving automation. So I think a lot of the even AI capabilities are more, I would say, intelligent automation, where the AI actually suggests or helps a human being, whether it is a operational person or relationship person, to help the customer do something in a much more efficient and effective manner. But still, you have a human being looking over things, making sure that things are accurate, the numbers are good, everything else is good. So I think it's a kind of a combination. I do think eventually over time, as the assisted journeys become more and more common, they will start to move more towards self-service, and the assisting part will become more and more in kind of more premium conversations or more specialized conversations. So I think it will eventually accelerate the adoption of self-service, and that's the direction it will move.
Excellent. Maybe a question to all three of you on the themes that you mentioned on harnessing the power of data and building an infrastructure that supports the quantum of data that's about to come. Second, on just being on the forefront when it comes to digitizing journeys. In fact, building new products and new customer journeys for mobile first, and then everything else. And then the topic of hyper-personalization and the importance of conversational messaging in marketing, commerce, and support. And underpinning all of this is especially for the large incumbents who've got a legacy tech stack. One of the big sort of underlying drivers to achieve any of this is the adaptability or the modularity of your tech stack. And here I'm talking about application architecture, but also your technology architecture and information architecture. Have you seen, what are some of the sort of best-in-class, no-regret moves, right, that large incumbents can make to be prepared for this change? Because the trends today may not be the trends 3 years from now or 5 years from now. 7 years from now, blockchain might become ubiquitous in a set of use cases. And this is a question open to all of you, so any of you can jump in. What are some of the no-regret moves that large companies can think of?
Well, I think let me jump in, right? One is sort of for traditional established incumbents, exposing all their services as APIs is a no-brainer, right? Because it's the foundation for everything. So this whole microservice architecture, APification, I mean, there's just a massive trend going on because there are fintech players emerging, there are neo banks and neo insurance companies and so on emerging as well, all of which provide that layer on top. And you can't even play in any of these things unless you have APIs, right? So that's sort of step one. I think step two is sort of explore multiple channels, right? I mean, they've had a website for a dozen years. They have had an app for like a few years. Look at messaging and conversational experiences, and ultimately let the user do the talking. Let the digital footfalls, so to speak, guide you as to where to invest more, right? Because consumers will automatically, tell you what kind of experiences they like, and then you kind of invest in it, right? So think omni-channel, just put it out there. And then lastly is just be open to listening, to observing, and in particular listening to consumer data, to listening, consumer fingertips will tell you what they like and where they want to go and what kind of experience they want to digest. Because if you're not getting those consumers coming in, your competitors are, or some neo fintech player is getting that as well, right? So I think just sort of watching, observing, and trying. I think this is a time of great flux and a great change. It can be both a threat and an opportunity, and the way to be nimble is to do some of these things.
Yeah, so I would say I agree with everything that Beerud said. I would say, I think for a large kind of legacy or much legacy kind of company who have resources and money, but they have their own challenges from a tech stack, culture, transformation perspective. So my view would be, I think the pace at which all the technologies are moving in this industry, I think doing incremental improvements here and there, maybe kind of inertia will push you there to do. But I do really think like you got to invest in long-term transformation, because yes, you can do some incremental investments into in particular area. You feel like I have a P&L to run, I may make some improvements that will work well for a few years. But the way the direction is going, you got to invest directly towards your future, where the industry is going, where the technical trends are going, everything that Beerud shared, right? Whether it's APIs, or AI, or cloud, or and sometimes you need to be very, very strategic about, hey, I need to invest in a lot of the foundational capability that they may not have. They may not have a data capability. They may not have other things. But you got to invest big, right? If you have resources, just go big, long term. Because if you don't do that, you may be kind of chugging along in slow growth mode and then kind of incremental improvements. But then at some point, you realize that you have missed the trends, and that's a much, much bigger problem. So from a cultural perspective, kind of my view is that you've got to invest on the transformation and really, really double down.
That brings me to an interesting discussion on, so we spoke about technology, but then I guess the tech is available, right? It's about, putting the resources and the mind share on it. Probably the bigger challenge for a legacy organization is on operating model and changing their culture and ways of working to embrace change and to be, especially for any sort of customer facing use case, to change at a much faster pace, so that you are staying abreast of the change and also keeping up to speed with your competition, which is not just your peer bank or peer insurer, but now expanding fast to any consumer tech company, any fintech company. What are some of the bottlenecks that you foresee in changes to operating model? And when I say operating model, I mean not just the org structure, but also ways of working. Agile is a much often used term these days. The way you organize yourselves, the way accountabilities are distributed, and so on and so forth. Any thoughts on that? Maybe Ratnesh, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so what we're seeing out here is, just adding on to what Deba said. See, incremental changes is passe. If especially the traditional organizations who have to compete with the fintechs, I think there are large transformation, and the large transformation, what we are seeing is being led by the CEO office, because it is now question about what value you're giving back to the shareholders, and it is about profitability, and it is about your revenue path and where you would be in next 3 years to 5 years. As I said, there is no middle cut. There's no small options out there. So we're seeing it's now a C-level organizations, and wherever we are talking in terms of large transformations, we're seeing a whole CEO office driving a matrix organization. It is no longer now, a department of sales or a marketing which is driving a customer experience. It used to be there a few years back. If you ask, you want to do a customer experience project, CIO would be there, but typically, they would talk to maybe, a CRM function on Salesforce automation, or they talk to a CMO on marketing transformation, or to a service on a service. It's no longer there. It is now a customer experience departments. We're seeing this used to be there, at least west, so they were replacing, but we're now seeing actual CDOs becoming center of a business blueprint, and they are actually signing on to business objectives, which obviously are core of customer experience driven strategies. And then the organizations are basically creating that structure to drive that. So I think in fact, just a couple of hours back, I was listening on a session to Airtel CEO, different industry, but saying that every day basically that organization now sits and looks at what they did right and what they did wrong. And I'm telling you, this is being replicated across every organizations now. It's no longer, it's a transformation, and a transformation led by a CEO function with the matrix organizations all tuned in, and doesn't matter which is the customer interaction point, whether it's service, it's finance, it is planning, it is your sales teams. They're all basically are part of that core team which is driving this agenda.
That's a very important point. Sorry, Deba, you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I'll add. I think I agree with a lot of things that Ratnesh shared. I would say there are a few things I see more and more in the financial and services industry. So one, I think there's some table stake for us to drive transformation. There's some table stake. You got to do it. Just by going there, you cannot drive transformation, but it is kind of essential. You got to be in this kind of agile kind of structure everybody is in. You've got to be focused on customer journeys and make sure that your digital transformation is focused on journeys, and you structure appropriately, you focus appropriately. But to Ratnesh's point, I think the transformation is more and more being driven, led by transformation office, product team, or product leader. I think historically our industry has been led more by distribution, operations, and those kind of functions. I think in the future, this will be led more by product and technology. Right? They will be the primary driver of the change and transformation, and others will be supporting them. I think they will directly, I see they directly reporting up to the C level, like directly the CEO, the CPOs, or the transformation officers, or COOs. Like I see that is essential, because you got to focus on long-term transformation. You got to think long-term. And if we kind of don't do all that, and you'll be kind of stuck. You may get some benefit for years, but we're really going to focus both from org structure perspective, culture perspective, as well as from a tech stack perspective on the long-term transformation.
It's a good point, and it's an important point that I want to emphasize. That one, that this is customer experience is not the CMO agenda anymore; it's the CEO agenda. In fact, one of the metrics that the CEO should be closely monitoring is NPS for your company at various levels. The second point that you made, interestingly, is also that there's got to be a closer, whatever way you come about it, whether it's agile or whatever other methodology you use, but there has to be a closer integration between business and technology, which has often been lacking in our industry, where business comes up with a set of requirements, throws it over the wall, IT catches it, and then they do something with it. That way of working is probably not going to work in the long run. The last point you made on how the org itself will change, Deba, where it's not going to be distribution and ops and risk driven. You're going to see more product and tech, which means you need to be able to hire more developers, designers, more product owners, which is a very different, it's basically a tech company selling financial services, right? That's the way to look at it. On that note, maybe do you see what are the big sort of strategic imperatives? And this is the last question. We'll wrap up on this in terms of finding the right talent, especially on product and tech for these large organizations. And maybe Beirut, having seen this industry for a long time and having worked in both the incumbent space and the insurgent space, maybe you can comment on this.
No, I mean, well, I think that is a really hard question, because as you can see with the spate of unicorn funding recently and so on, right? Talent, there's a war for talent right now, right? So of course, it's easy to say what kind of talent to look for, but it's hard to actually action it, right? So what I might say, a simpler suggestion is to find partners, find companies that have the scale, that can be, that can contribute or help, or provide some thought leadership and guidance and assistance in the journey, and maybe work with multiple ones if needed, right? Maybe do trial and error and so on. But ultimately, that's where there's a lot of innovation going on in the ecosystem, and it might be easier just to find the right partners that can help you along the way, right? I mean, that might be the easiest, or rather a more practical solution to this problem.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in there. Actually, it is right. It's also about today. The cloud has been such a great leveler right now. Today, an ability to try out a new technology, try it out and see whether it succeeds or fail, is no longer of a 12, 18-month cycle, right? It is a very, very close loop, and and you get your rewards and you see it succeeds, and then you adapt it or you move on. And that's what I think cloud adoption, and I know it's fintech and it's regulatory and it's compliance driven, all that is all fine, and I think with all those boundaries across, with all the regulatory and data concerns. But if we see organizations are looking at outsourcing and not afraid to try out the new technologies, because as I said, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, they just move on to the next one, or they learn and build or go after the next best action.
Thank you. Maybe that's a good place to wrap up. Just a quick recap. I think we all agree that customer expectations are changing, but customer experience still remains of paramount importance. And the three sort of big imperatives for companies, especially in BFSI, to deliver superior customer experience has to rest on how you harness the power of data, how you digitize your journeys, and how you expand your view of channels to your customers. And two big sort of enablers to deliver all of this is going to be big, large-scale transformation on enterprise technology to be adaptable, and massive changes to your operating model to work in a different manner. And of course, the last point, of course, being that things are changing. You don't have to commit to long-term, solutions without testing it out. You need to have a test and learn approach to everything. And there's plenty of partners out there, both for technology and for talent, that you should be leveraging to deliver superior experience. And maybe that's a good way to wrap up. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for your valuable insights, Beerud, Deba, and Ratnesh, and thanks for joining us on this session. Back to you, Kavya.